The practice of HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points, gives us 7 principles that make sure food is safe. To make the way we work better, it is important that you listen to all of these principles.
The first principle is called the list of potential hazards.
As the name explains, there are some dangers that the HACCP practice can explain to us before they start, and if we are not careful, these dangers can happen. This is because of the food, from the time it is made to the time we serve it, may have bad bacteria, but this depends on how we follow the steps of all the HACCP processes.
Here are 4 possible dangers to food safety: microbiological, animals, chemicals, and physical. Let us learn about these dangers in detail. Microbiological. Fungi, parasites, and bacteria can cause disease. Animals. Rats, flies, and other insects that can pass on diseases. Chemicals. Drops of detergents and other cleaning products can infect food. Physical. Glass, stone, sand, hair, and other physical things that can cause danger to food.
Bacteria can be a great danger of infection. The kitchen is a place where there is temperature, humidity, acidity, food, and time. All these things give bacteria a perfect place to grow and become more and more.
So, it is important to make sure that we do not help bacteria to increase in our kitchens.
Now, let us understand more about hazards, and let us go to the second principle of HACCP. Explaining critical control points. Critical control points, we also call these CCPs, are parts of the kitchen procedure that need to be watched closely every day so that food safety continues.
You can take out some dangers in different parts of the food procedure or take some dangers to very low levels.
The secret to make sure food is safe is to identify these parts in the process. Remember, there are 3 hazards: microbiological danger, the chemical danger, and physical danger. Now, in the second principle of the HACCP, we see 5 points that must be watched and taken care of closely. This is because they can affect food safety, suppliers, delivery, storage, preparation, and service. Let us see examples of how to watch for each of these 5 points. Are the suppliers working according to HACCP? Do you know if suppliers are following HACCP procedure when you get the receipt of merchandise storage? For how long and under what conditions are the products stored? What kind of environment is food prepared in, and what types of materials are used? From the preparation to the time of eating, what are the critical points?
Principle number 3 helps us put in place critical limits for each critical control point.
As we know, our job is to take away hazards or to reduce them to the lowest level. Each critical control point has a different level of risk. We may think of the lowest level of risk, but in fact, it can be the highest level. This is why we call it dangerous. Let us see the conditions we call acceptable.
Let us think, for example, the supply of fresh meat and try to see the critical limits with some help from these questions. Is the way of packing the product acceptable? Unopened packages, yes. Exposed meat or bad packaging, no. Is the way of moving the product acceptable? It is acceptable if done in a closed and refrigerated vehicle. In a vehicle that leaves the food outdoors, no. Is the temperature of the product when delivered acceptable? If it is refrigerated, it is acceptable. If it is at room temperature, no. Is the product expiry date acceptable? If there are some days between the delivery date and expiry date, yes. If product expires on date of delivery, no.
We now know when a situation is acceptable, and we will see how to control it. The 4th principle is determining how to watch out for the critical control points.
How can we make sure these critical limits will not be passed?
Here are some ways to watch the critical control points. Watch and record the temperature For example, when cooling or frying food. Check the processing and expiration dates of products by taking notes. Check the cleanliness of your workplace equipment and the hygiene of employees. Observe and test the working methods of staff.
The management of watching critical control points is easy. Now you need to know how to fix any problem that you can see when you are watching the critical control points. The fifth principle is determining correct actions for each critical control point.
If you notice a problem from the previous step, what are the next steps to make sure food is safe?
Here are some examples of corrective actions. Making the workplace environment better, like making sure cooling is what it is supposed to be. Changing or staying away from suppliers who are not following food safety rules. Improving cleaning methods. Changing your ways of working. For example, if you can see that dirty dishes are not separated properly from clean dishes, tell your colleagues or employees and make the right changes so that it will not happen again. Provide more training courses to staff.
Work principle number 6 is verification and validation.
It is important to check from time to time if your kitchen is meeting the standards set by HACCP.
At the time of validation, the secret is to see with the eyes of the customer or someone who is not part of the kitchen. This can help you find out where you can improve on your HACCP standards. For example, after you buy a new machine, are there any new dangers? Are there practiced actions for correction still appropriate? It is important to understand that situations may change in a kitchen whenever there's a new equipment, suppliers, or manufacturers. The seventh and final principle is maintaining documentation and records.
The seventh principle tells us that everything must be written and documented in the whole action plan of HACCP. This will make the kitchen rules clear to everyone.
With proper documentation, you can prove that kitchen processes are watched and recorded. Now you know the 7 principles of HACCP. Let us revise. List of potential dangers. Explaining of critical control points. Explaining of critical limits for each critical control point. Determining how to watch the critical control point. Determining the corrective actions for each critical control point. Verification and validation. Documentation and registration.